Howdy, it's tubalcain again, and this is a three-part video on how to make this little wobbler steam engine. This is aimed at young boys or beginners who might enjoy making something like this for a winter project from scrap material and other easily obtained materials, and this can be done without any power tools except for a drill press and all of the hand tools that are at your disposal. So be sure and watch all three parts of this video. I hope you like it. And welcome back to my little machine shop. And I know what you're thinking, oh no, not another video on steam engines. Well, yes it is, but this video is a little different in that I'm aiming this at boys, 12-year-old, 14-year-old boys, trying to get them interested in shop work and steam engines and things like that. Also maybe some of you older guys that are just getting into this, but the idea here is to build a little wobbler oscillating type steam engines such as these with a minimum amount of tools, that is without a machine shop, just hand tools, but you will need a drill press because there's a lot of people that do not have a fully equipped shop, and I do have the luxury of a unlimited number of tools when I build things, and so I'm going to handicap myself a little bit on this video and this build by minimizing the equipment that I use. So I'll use only hand tools and a drill press. Now if you are interested in this type of thing, do a search for tubalcain steam engine, and I have probably 50 or 100 videos on steam engines and different builds and things like that. So if you want a little extra on that, go back and look at some of those. So the idea here is just with simple tools here like files and saws and measuring instruments and punches and layout tools and that, can you produce this engine, and can you do it with a minimum of materials that you might find around your shop or at the hardware store. Not hard to find obscure items which will immediately discourage people, because there might be some people that are building this in a deluxe apartment in the sky. There are no plans for this. I kind of wing it as I go along, but I have made so many of these wobbler type or oscillating type of engines. They'll run on air. You don't need steam. However, you would need compressed air to run this. But this is made of castings, and we're not going to make one out of castings today. We're going to substitute other materials. For instance, on these two prototypes that I built here, the base itself is wood. The upright is just a piece of aluminum, and the cylinder is a piece of square aluminum, but it could be other materials. It could be plastics. But however, if you're just in a little home shop, you may not have industrial plastics like PVC and that in the thicker sizes. And notice that rather than a casting or a big piece of steel for a flywheel, and the flywheel has to be heavy, and it would be most difficult for someone to get a piece of material like this and saw it with a hand hacksaw and saw it straight, especially if you're a beginner. Even I couldn't saw it straight. Look at how crooked that has been sawed, even by a power saw. So instead of starting with something like this, I'm suggesting that you go to the hardware store and buy these what we call Fender Washers, and they come in different sizes and different diameters and hole sizes and all of that. And just buy a group of them for $1.50 and stack them together on shaft made of a screw, machine screw, round or could be hex. And you know, there's your flywheel already made for you out of and I'm trying to make this a short project that doesn't take a week or 2 weeks to do. The spring could be out of a ballpoint pen. But there are a few holes in operations here that need to be rather straight. And that's why I'm recommending a drill press. It's awful hard to drill a straight hole with a hand electric drill or even battery powered drill. Let me run one of these for you now. There's great satisfaction working with your hands in a shop, and to have something that operates is quite satisfying and fun. Here's a little wobbler running, and I'll talk more about the principles of the valving later on, but this is running on compressed air at about 4 pounds is all that is. They're bulletproof. The design is simple. There's a lot of room for error, and it's still probably going to work. Might need just a little more pressure with this because the fitting of this by hand is not nearly as good. I've got a bit of a leak here too. This is the input. This is the exhaust. Copper tubing, hobby tubing. A lot of imbalance in something like this, so it's vibrating quite a bit in my hands, but so what? You can see the crank here also is a Fender washer. It'll run in either direction if you switch this input, and you always have to hand start them. They're not self-starting because they're single action. See if we can run the other one. I built these quite a while ago during the summer, and then I didn't get around to making the video till now as the weather starts to get cold. But that's how they run. You can see the exhaust here is just a hole. You don't even need a piece of tubing in there for the exhaust. This upright is made of a piece of aluminum channel that I just cut off the other leg of it. So that was handy to screw right onto the base. Some of the aluminum that you might get does not lend itself well to bending. It might break on you. This could be steel also. It doesn't have to be aluminum. So you can use available materials, whatever you can come up with or find in your shop or at the scrapyard, or maybe the neighbor who has a shop will give you something, who knows. But you have to be a bit resourceful also in building this. Okay, let's get started. Enough talking, and we'll start with the upright. And in this case it's a piece of aluminum, and notice that it's L-shaped because originally that one was made from this aluminum channel, and I cut off a strip of that and then cut off one leg of it, and that gave me that nice base without bending or without making a separate piece. And you see this can fasten right onto a wooden base, whereas if you do not have a bend on it, this would be a good idea here, piece of wood with a slot in it, and then you can just screw it right into it, and I think that's the route we're going to go here. And I've experimented with different materials, and you can even use plastic. For instance, here's some smoke-colored ABS plastic, which actually is this, with the masking on it, polycarbonate, and is extremely tough. You can also use plexiglass, that's a trade name, which is really an acrylic, and again this is a 1/4 inch thick. That would be great, easy to saw, easy to work with. Stay away from the materials you might find in the hardware store, that thin clear plastic that they use for glazing windows, because it is brittle. They probably could give you some little scraps of it, because they always got scraps laying around. Here's a piece of PVC, a little bit thicker, but this would be great to work with. But I know that nobody's going to come across something like this because it's really an industrial item. But there's just all kinds of plastics. But if you don't have that, let's talk about some metals. And I know for some beginners that you can't even identify metals yet. Maybe you don't know one from the other, but of course if it is attracted by a magnet, it's steel. If it is not, it's more than likely aluminum, and lightweight and shiny. So aluminum is great to work with. Steel would be fine. Now if it's kind of shiny like this, now I'm not talking about stainless. If you have stainless, don't use it. It's just too hard to drill. But if it's shiny like this, and that would be a perfect piece to use because it's 1/4 inch thick and 1 inch wide, but this is cold roll steel. You could not bend this very easily to make this type of a base. However, if you find some that is like blackish or bluish in color, and this is just a little bit too narrow, this bends very nicely. It's just nice metal to work with, but you're probably not going to find that at the hardware store. Hardware stores and farm centers and that have that rack of steel and aluminum and that, but you got to buy 3-foot or 6-foot section, and it just tends to be expensive for all of that, especially if you only need just a little piece of it. I know I'm jabbering here, but you need to know this. Aluminum like this is really too thin. That's just sheet metal, and that's a piece off the back of a microwave or something. You can find all kinds of stuff like that at your local recycler, but here's something a little thicker. It's about an 1/8 inch thick, and that would be pretty good, and that could be cut with a hacksaw. That also is scrap, as you can tell by all of the holes. So maybe you have a scrap pile where you can get at some of that stuff. But at the hobby center, again, there is Reynolds aluminum, but you might have to buy a 6-foot piece of it, which would be $19 or something, you know, absurd. So that's why you need to start with something that you can find around your home or shop or neighborhood. I finally settled on using aluminum, and it's about 3/16 thick. This is wider than what I need, and of course way longer, so I need to cut it. And I have decided here on using this type of base, so I need that extra height. So instead of being just about 3 3/4, I'm going to make it 4 1/2, which is about 115 millimeters. You didn't think I knew anything about metric, did you? Actually, I'm quite an expert at metric. Well, who isn't? You know, it's so simple. And you can use a Sharpie or even a pencil or a scratch awl or, you know, whatever you got. And it's handy to have a square, several of them even. Mark it off like this. Well, I'll use this Sharpie, it'll show up a little bit better. Although that line is relatively wide and inaccurate, and we want that to be 1 inch wide, so that's about 25 millimeters. So this is scrap out here. You can mark it in 2 spots and then connect it with a straight edge, or use your square like this. Again, that's scrap, that side. Now I'm going to saw that to length with a hand hacksaw. Hopefully you have a vise. If you do not, you could clamp this to the bench with a C-clamp. Now it works better if you, for cutting this off, to hold it this way in the vise rather than like this. It's easier to saw straight. And put your line fairly close to the vise jaws so that you get rigidity. You don't saw way out here, it's going to bounce all around. And use a nice sharp hacksaw blade, and a coarse one will do nicely for this. Now work safely, wear your safety glasses, and practice all the safety rules that I talk about in my various videos, and make sure you have your parents' permission. And hello girls, I hope I have some girls and women watching this, although I tend to talk, I think, to the boys, because that's what I'm used to in the shop classes. I had very few girls over the years. Remember, a hacksaw cuts on the forward motion, not on the backward. Be careful as you cut through that you don't come down and cut yourself, because you're exerting a lot of pressure on it. That's hard work. I'm not used to using hand tools. Hopefully your vise opens wide enough to hold that 4-inch piece, 4 1/2, whatever it was, because if it doesn't, you might have to clamp this onto the side of the bench to saw. So this is going to take a little bit more work. Remember to saw a little bit off to the side of your layout line so that you leave just a little bit of material for filing down to the line, or in case you don't saw straight. But again, when you saw like this, you see it's easier to get it straight than if you're cutting upright like this. And I won't show all that because it's just going to take too long. Always remembering which side is the good piece and which is the scrap, the waste. A good sharp file is a wonderful tool, and this is a double cut, so it's rather aggressive and it will take a lot off. And you can even out your saw marks by filing this way, or removing more material by filing like that. Remember that a file again cuts on the forward motion, not on the backward motion. And the width of this is not very critical. So if it's a little over or a little under the 25 millimeter, so what? And keep your file clean with a file brush, which you will run this way. This file has some rust on it. It's been around a while, but it's still quite sharp. Then that leaves some file marks. If you want to get the file marks out, use a finer file, which is a standard single cut mill file like this. And that's all I'm going to say about filing. We can also file the ends, and then always take the burrs off, left by sawing and filing, and that also with a file, and you can feel it if there's any burrs on there, so get those burrs off. Later on you can shine some of this up with emery cloth if you desire, if you want a fine finish. I don't usually spend much time on that. This could be painted also later. I'm going to make the base next simply because it's nice to have some way to hang on to the work rather than just having it lay loose here. In other words, it's going to be on this display stand, and I can take it on and off. But this is a piece of oak. It's just scrap, and I'm going to, let's see, it's about 3 1/4 or thereabouts, 3 3/8 wide. So I'm just going to cut it off so that it's square. I already marked it there, and you can use a hacksaw for this, but if you got a wood cutting saw, go ahead and use it. Now for those of you that have bandsaws and abrasive machines, go ahead and use them by all means, but I'm talking here mainly to people that do not have a fully equipped shop. So I'll saw that off, and then I'll show you how to lay out this notch. A nice sharp wood saw such as this is a mighty handy thing. Boy, that is one sharp saw, as oak is a mighty hard wood. I didn't file this yet, but you can file the wood to clean it up or sand it. And I like to lay out a center line, so I've already found the center of this, which I believe is 1 5/8 in from the side, but depends on the width of your work. But using a square or use several marks, there's the center line, and I want this to be about 1 1/2 in. So with this square set at that, this is the depth, and I want it to be 1 inch wide, so using a ruler, this is 25 millimeters, so it'd be about 12 1/2 millimeters on each side, or half. And then again with your square, so there's the notch that I'm going to remove so that this will fit in. So it's alright if it's a little bit wider, as long as this will fit in there, and I do need to saw just a little bit wider than that. And how are you going to saw blind like that? Well, come in with your saw blade down to the line, and it probably would help, and I think I will do that, if we drill a little bit of a hole here and use a coping saw or something like that to go across. Now if you got a bandsaw, that would be a real easy cut. So I'll drill some holes off camera. I'm going to use the drill press, and I think I'll make those 3/16 holes. See, there's a couple holes there, 3/16. This is an alternate way of doing it, because how are you going to make that cut? But this could be made with several pieces also glued together, so you're avoiding that type of notch. That's a little bit difficult maybe for a beginner to deal with. So I'll saw the long marks here off camera. I can't show everything or the video runs too long. Much of what I'm showing you here is basic junior high woodshop work. Here's a coping saw. Hopefully you have one of those, and I threaded the blade through the hole. Remember, a coping saw, the teeth point toward the handle, just the opposite of a hacksaw, and that allows you to make this cross cut. And then we can file it to the line. Otherwise, how are you going to get that piece out of there? There, now we can get the saw out too as well. Now I'll put it in the vise like this and saw it down, file it down with a nice coarse file to the line, which is very easy to do. However, this file is too wide to go in there, so I'll find another file. I realize I repeat myself sometimes because I make a video like this over several days, and you know, I'm an old man, I forget what I say. Now, this is the top side. I like to take a file and bevel all the corners on the top side, and you can do that with sandpaper. I particularly like this coarse sandpaper held in this kind of holder. You probably won't have that, but use some coarse paper for that. Do all the corners like that. Dress it up just a little bit, which I'll do off camera. But here's an alternate way if you do not have a coping saw to remove this piece, which I'll put back in place, but you can diagonally cut it, you know, one way and then the other, and then like this, until you remove most all of it and then file down to the line. So you don't have to have a coping saw. Okay, enough about woodworking for a moment. We're back to metalworking, and remember that the upright's going to go in there about like this. So the blue line indicates the position, which is 3/4, and then the red line is 3/8 from the bottom, and it just doesn't matter where you put those two holes, about equally spaced so it looks good. And that's up to you. And then take a center punch and punch those, and we will drill them. Always center punch on metal so that the hole doesn't drift on you. Now I'll find the screws and we'll determine what size we need to drill. I'm at the drill press. Wear your safety glasses. I'm going to drill 11/64 because I've chosen two screws like this. They're number 8s and they fit into the 11/64. I don't know what the metric size is, but then when I drill into the wood, I'll be drilling 9/64. Now always use a vise and position your work so that you don't drill into the vise. So when I drill, it'll come out the bottom here. So you don't damage the vise or the drill press. And if you're a boy, make sure you have your dad's permission to use this equipment. Aluminum drills very nicely. Now I will drill the two 9/64 holes in here, and I'm going to transfer them right from this and make sure that you're square. It might do well to do one of them, put a screw in, and then mark the second one. That's how I normally do it, but you want to be square. So I just lay it in there like that, and with this, get it about flush where I got my finger back there, or so that it doesn't rest on the metal, and then I'll drill that hole and then put a screw in there. And I'll just hold that in the drill press vise like I did, only upright, just as you see it here. Again, I got a screw in there and it's pretty darn snug, and I squared it up because there is some swinging room there. There always is. And then again, I'll mark this with a scratch awl or a center punch, whatever you got. And then for a change here, I'm just going to use the portable drill so I don't have to switch vices here. And drill at least a ½ inch deep. Can be plenty deep or even deeper than that, and then we'll drive that screw in there. And this is going to come on and off several times during the operation here, but now we finally got the upright on the base. Now I will lay out the crankshaft hole, which is 1 inch up from the base, not from the bottom here, but from the wood. And then the center is ½ inch, or 12.5 millimeters, I suppose you could say. And that's ready to drill. I will center punch it off camera, and then I'm going to drill that hole 3/16 diameter, because that is the size of the shaft that we're going to use here. 3/16. 3/16 drill. Always wear safety glasses, always use a vise, and hang on to the vise, because the vise itself can go flying as well and scare the heck out of you and probably hurt you. Now as you come through, always release your pressure a little bit. Notice how I back off to break the chips as well. And again, what I've done here is to straddle so that the hole comes out in the middle of the vise here and does not damage the vise. You can ruin vices by drilling holes into them. It's back on the base, and whenever you drill a hole, there's a burr produced. So take a file and remove the burr. Like that. Well, that kind of completes the base and the upright here, at least for now. We have to turn our attention to the other parts, so I'm going to take a break and go to lunch, and I'll see you in a ½ hour.